I'm a German citizen. This is a letter to the German state, and it's basically a form that is requesting that they're sending my election papers to Colombia, where I'm currently at. The reason why I do all this work, sending this letter to Germany in order to be able to vote, is because I think Germany is at one of the most important turning points in its young history. And as the title of this video says, I will vote, or I will try to vote for the far-right party Alternative for Germany, Alternative für Deutschland. While I'm not even that sure if this letter will even make it on time, I will at least try. And yeah, I've seen that Elon Musk promoted this party too, which isn't the reason why I'm voting for this. I've actually checked this party out myself. And to be fair, I don't even consider it to be far right at all. And this is what we're going to look at in this video, because the German government and the German media has made up a lot of lies about this party that I want to share with you. Because in the end, the more I listened to the media and the government, the more I thought this party was right-wing. And the more I looked at the people myself, the less I thought they were right-wing. So in the end, I had two choices. Am I going to believe the narrative that the government and the media is pushing upon me? Or am I going to believe my own narrative? And when I did more research, this choice became much easier for me with time. And the reason was simply that the government and the media is lying like crazy and evidently lying. The problem with this is it's very hard to see because the government and the media are operating together at this point. Especially the state media in Germany, which is funded by the citizens and kind of controlled by the government, is extremely unneutral and is trying to push a specific political agenda. But let's go back a couple of years in time so you understand why I don't trust the government or the media anymore. A couple of years ago, there was riots on the streets in Germany, and the media said that there's right-wing radicals who are chasing down migrants on the street. Now, for this kind of things, the German Secret Service would be, or the German Constitution protection would be responsible. And the boss of the Constitution protection back then, Georg Maaßen, actually started coming out saying that there's no evidence for right-wing radicals chasing down migrants. He said there were some cases where there was violence involved, but there wasn't a chase, like a literal chase of a mob of radicals that are chasing down migrants. But that was what the media said. And the crazy thing is Maaßen actually started monitoring the media because he said since they're lying, it's his job as the boss of the Constitution protection to monitor them, because media that are lying are actually against the Constitution, problematic for the German state. Now, for this, he got fired by Angela Merkel, more or less personally, and what happened was swept under the rug. He faced enormous challenges within the CDU, which is the party that Angela Merkel was a part of. And yeah, he lost his job, and he kind of was like a more quiet member of the parliament since then. But if the guy who's trying to protect German democracy starts saying that the media is lying and he gets fired by that from the government, I think you have to be very, very suspicious of the activity that's going on. And this is only the tip of the iceberg, because there's been a lot of other things that have been coming out now. So back then, when the guy who started monitoring the media for lies got fired, they got replaced with a guy who's very close to the government, and who he said it himself is pushing a specific political agenda against the AfD. Now, since a couple of years, we've been hearing that there's a right-wing part of the party that's like right-wing radicals. And the leader of that supposedly right-wing wing is Björn Höcke. So if anybody in Germany is talking negatively about the AfD, they're always talking about this guy. So I got curious and I did start doing my own research about this guy. I read his book even, to be fair, only 50% of it, but there were a lot of the quotes that the media is bringing about him that are supposedly the evidence for the fact that he's a right-wing radical. If you see them in context in his book, they're not right-wing at all. And what the media is doing with them is literal fraud. And the reason is there's this book by Simon Sinek. It's called Start With Why. And this book starts with two texts. One is from Adolf Hitler and the other one is by Martin Luther King. And he doesn't tell you who is who. And you read the text and you say, well, the first one is Hitler and the second one is Martin Luther King. And then he tells you it's actually the opposite and gives you the context of this text, which switches the whole meaning around. Which means that you can take something out of context from Martin Luther King and make it sound like Hitler. And this is what they've been doing with Björn Höcke pretty much the whole time. For instance, Höcke said something like, the whole problem is that Adolf Hitler is described as the absolute evil. If you see this out of context and don't think about the statement, it can sound like he's trying to talk down what Nazis did. But if you know Höcke better and are familiar with his philosophical views, you know that he's doing a philosophical experiment here. The experiment being that there is no person who's absolute evil because there's also no person who's absolute good. Humans usually are not in absolutes. So maybe Hitler cheated his golden retriever well, or his wife. There just needs to be one part in him that has something good to it for him to be not absolute evil by definition. And on top of that, this thinking that you describe Hitler as the absolute evil is actually quite dangerous. Because what happens if there's a guy who's even more evil than him and you just declare Hitler as the worst? Mao Zedong in China, he actually killed more people than Hitler. So if you just put this label on people and you see him that way, you're actually limiting yourself in the scope of evil in reality. Because evil can go much further than what Hitler did. Like that, if you think that's absolute evil that humans can perform, then you don't understand human psychology at all. Like, yes, it was very, very dark and very, very tragic what he did. But if you think this is the worst how people can go, boy, you need to read more history, like seriously. Anyway, so he has lots of statements like this that are just taken out of context. And, you know, as I described before with this book, if you take those statements out of context and you don't explain what the meaning of them is, then you can make anything sound like Hitler, even the best people in history, like Martin Luther King. There's another guy, Maximilian Krah, who's also supposedly part of the right-wing part of the party. In the European election, he was asked by a newspaper if he would describe everybody of the Nazi SS as a criminal. And when he refused to do so with his PhD in law, the AfD pulled him back as the candidate because the media was going crazy. Marie Le Pen from Rassemblement National quit the coalition with the AfD, Meloni as well, for this statement because they said he's a Nazi supporter. But this is ridiculous. What he said is, from a law perspective, 100% correct because there is no group guilt. Groups cannot perform crimes, only individuals can. Because in a group, there's going to be distinctions who did what. What if you join the SS and you try to destroy it from within? Are you a criminal now? That's ridiculous. That's why every democracy is built on the foundation that you have an individual fault and an individual a process. Have you ever seen a process in a democracy against a group of people? No, because you need individual distinguishments between who did what. Who operated with group guilt? The Nazis operated with group guilt. You're a Jew, you're part of the problem. So it doesn't make any sense. Yeah. So this thinking that the thinking that they're following is closer to the Nazis than what Maximilian Krah, the supposedly right-wing radical, said. Björn Höcke and Maximilian Krah. So those guys, they were Björn Höcke especially was in Eastern Germany, and he was monitored by the constitution protection there and labeled as right-wing radical. Now, the issue was that actually that the guy who made up that label, he was the boss, and this kind of like category was his own project. Nobody else in this institution had any access to that. And in fact, there were evidence eliminated that were showing it's actually unlawful to categorize the AfD in that manner, because there's no evidence that the group or the party per se is supposedly right-wing radical. And it gets even more crazy. The guy who categorized the AfD as right-wing radical there, before he joined the constitution protection, he was part of a biker group who was monitored by the constitution protection. And he was part of a event that was monitored by them. And one day later, he joined them as president of this institution. So given all of those facts, I no longer trust the media or the government on which party to vote. There's this stuff that I'm telling you is just tip of the iceberg. Like, it gets so much worse, so much more lies, so much more stuff. And given the current political climate in Germany, with the immigration, with the violence, with the freedom of speech is restricted, I'm definitely going to vote for the AfD. They want to cap maximum income tax with 25%. They want to reduce the business taxes. They want to reestablish freedom of speech. So they're doing the things that I personally want to see. And if that's the party that I need to vote for, I don't let myself be held back by those right-wing radical narratives, because as I just said, I uncovered a lot of truth about that, and I just do not see the right-wing radicals there. I was threatened by a right-wing radical once. He had a tattoo of the Nazi symbol. He threatened me with a knife. He was violent, so I had to go and witness in front of a judge against him. And those guys I do not support at all. I think they're very dangerous. But I don't see those kind of people in the AfD. I think that some of them made statements where if you want to see something radical, then you can find it. But the party per se is not right-wing radical. So I'm going to get this letter now. I'm going to bring it to the post office, and I'm going to vote AfD.